Sorry, let's just get that off. Right, and let's just do the 4 limitless contemplations. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness, please. May all beings be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Semchen damje dewatang dewe jutang den pajutik dungal tang dungal chichu tang trawajutik dungal mepe dewatam patang minra wajutik nering chaktang ni tang trawe tang nong chempo lani pajutik. That's my watch. Good evening, everybody. If you've just come, and tonight we're going to do knowing the unreality of the 5 skandhas brings us to the 3 doors of liberation. Butt in whenever you feel like it. If you back, you must butt in whenever you want. You know? And Marion, I want to hear your voice. And Lindsay, I'm happy to see you. Okay. So I'm going to start with a very interesting quotation from Tai Situ in his book, Relative World, Ultimate Mind. And I think it's a really good quote. He says here, and listen carefully to this, the reason we're here, we forget, the reason we're here is to take responsibility for the fact that where we are, whether we're in a war, whether we're in a peace, where we are is a result of everything we ourselves have created and what use we have made of every opportunity offered. Now read that again quickly. The reason we're here is to take responsibility for the fact that where we are, no matter where we are, is a result of everything we ourselves have created and what use we have made of every opportunity offered. Because every negative thing is an opportunity offered. And I think the whole world, I'm speaking to a lot of people overseas and everything, and everybody seems to be in a bad way in their marches and their hatred and their angers, and people are putting forth these videos. I can't even look at the videos anymore. They're actually getting on my nerves and they're making me feel sleepless and everything. So I'm not watching very much anymore because I think it's too depressing for words. But tonight, butt in and let's look at the unreality of our circumstances. And let's look at the fact that we create our circumstances even though we can't possibly even think that we do. And when I looked at the Monlams, everybody sitting there, there were all these monks, there were all these Westerners, and then this guy that I know, you know, and I think to myself, everybody's there that needs to be there. You wouldn't get to Bodhgaya unless you had the merit and the karma to actually get there. So it's a very interesting thing. So I want to start off with a little story, which is so important to challenge you tonight. Nasruddin was eating a poor man's diet of chickpeas and bread. His neighbor, who also claimed to be a wise man, was living in a grand house and dining on sumptuous meals provided by the emperor himself. His neighbor told Nasruddin, if only you would learn to flatter the emperor and be subservient like I do, you would not have to live on chickpeas and bread. Nasruddin replied, and if only you would learn to live on chickpeas and bread like I do, you would not have to flatter and be subservient to the emperor. So life is being true to yourself. It's your true choice what you do, or living a lie in samsara. And so many times, I was talking to somebody yesterday who said to me, Melanie, I can't do it anymore. I I can't fake it. I can't do all these things. I don't know, maybe it's better for me to go. I said, no, maybe it's better for you to stay and try things out and try and be true to yourself. And then maybe it would be much, much better, okay? Because otherwise, that deception that we have lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, eventually our chances run out if we can't look at who our Buddha nature is and who we are. And remember that the lies can make us very popular with people. And I'm finding it particularly difficult because when we tell the samsaric lie, we fit in with people and they like us and we're popular and we're having a lovely life, okay, and we're acceptable, we fit in with them. It's really, really hard because I was talking to somebody yesterday who said, I just can't do it anymore. I said, you must do whatever you need to do. But you can't also, if you're in a cave meditating, you can be alone and you can live by yourself, but you can't live in samsara absolutely alone, solo, with no one around you. So it's really important that you are able to say what you have to say, but like I keep my mouth shut often when all our relatives and people overseas are talking to me and they're telling me what they're going through and all that kind of thing. And I really want to say something. I want to say something which I wish would be comforting, but I zip my lips because whatever I'm going to say is going to be misinterpreted anyway. So you have to have discriminating wisdom in what you tell people and what you don't. But it's really important. I want to read this little poem quickly called The Most Beautiful Flower, which is really an interesting poem, and it goes with what we're saying tonight. The park bench was deserted as I sat down to read, beneath the long straggly branches of an old willow tree, disillusioned by life with good reason to frown, for the world was intent on dragging me down. And if that weren't enough to ruin my day, a young boy out of breath approached me, all tired from play. He stood right before me with his head tilted down and said with great excitement, "Look what I found." In his hand was a flower, and what a pitiful sight, with its petals all worn, not enough rain or too little light. Wanting him to take his dead flower and go off to play, I faked a small smile and then shifted away. But instead of retreating, he sat by my side and placed the flower to his nose and declared with overacted surprise, "It sure smells pretty and it's beautiful too. That's why I picked it. Here, it's for you." The weed before me was dying or dead, not vibrant of colors, orange, yellow, or red. But I knew I must take it or he might never leave. So I reached for the flower and replied, "Just what I need." But instead of him placing the flower in my hand, he held it mid-air without reason or plan. It was then that I noticed for the very first time that weed-toting boy could not see. He was blind. I heard my voice quiver. Tears shone like the sun as I thanked him for picking the very best one. "You're welcome," he smiled, and then he ran off to play, unaware of the impact he'd had on my day. I sat there and wondered how he managed to see a self-pitying woman beneath an old willow tree. How did he know of my self-indulged plight? Perhaps from his heart, he'd been blessed with true sight. Through the eyes of a blind child, at last I could see the problem was not with the world, the problem was with me. And for all of those times I myself had been blind, I vowed to see beauty in life and appreciate every second that's mine. Then I held that wilted flower up to my nose and breathed in the fragrance of a beautiful rose, and smiled as I watched that young boy, another weed in his hand, about to change the life of an unsuspecting old man. It's a very beautiful story there. It's a beautiful poem. And I think it gives you a lot to think about, because really, we've got to understand that it's us who creates us. Now, it's us who create our circumstances. And sometimes the enmeshment with the negative emotions, the enmeshment with the skandhas, which we're going to talk about, and you're really welcome to butt in, because it's a subject you really can. But when you are enmeshed with that and you really believe it to be true, your whole life can go on a downward trend. And I think we all are in the world at the moment. It's really difficult. It's really, really difficult at the moment. And I think we all are on a little bit of a downward trend. And when we look at the whole of the skandhas, we have to look at the story of Rudra. Now, if you Google Rudra, you'll get all the Hindu explanations of Rudra. But Rudra was the ego full-blown in Buddhism. And the story of Rudra is a very, very interesting one. Very briefly, I'm not going to go into it too much, but the story of Rudra was this master and his servant were having an argument about a particular teaching in the Dharma. They decided to go to a wise man and put it to him as to who was right in their interpretation of the teaching. So they put it to the master, and the master turned with no hesitation and said to the servant, "You are right," and to the master, you have not got it right. You have got it wrong. Anyway, that was the beginning of Rudra's ego little trip. Rudra was furious with his servant, furious probably with himself. And that started the path of the ego called Rudra. And the ego became more and more and more monstrous, okay? More monstrous, until it says in the Buddhist text that Rudra, that in one of his future incarnations, Rudra was this ugly monster son of a human and a Rakshasa, a devil, a devil and a human, one of these negative forces united, and Rudra was born out of them in a lifetime a lot later than that master, because now he was this horrible monster. And when they put the mother died, and when they put the mother in the grave, they put Rudra in the grave. But Rudra didn't even die. He ate his mother's body and all the blood and all the everything. I mean, if you look at the story, it parallels very well to what we saw in the massacre and everything. I mean, Rudra started to eat human flesh, and he started to become more and more and more powerful. Then he wanted to control the world. Then he made everybody subservient. Anything good was crushed. Anything evil was brought up, until right in the very end of this long story of Rudra, you can get Ringu Tulku on it, Mark. He tells the story of Rudra very long. In the end, Rudra is subjugated. Manjushri, who's the master of wisdom, actually entered his body, which was now half human and half animal, entered his body, and eventually, after thousands of lifetimes, Rudra surrendered, okay? And Rudra had to start from the beginning and then come up with the Dharma. He was then being actually brought and magnetized into the Dharma, and he had to start from the beginning, which he could have avoided all those thousands of incarnations. So Rudra is the story of the human self, its power, its delusions, its rise to the height of control, then its crushing defeat eventually, and surrender. Is this really necessary? Halada, is it necessary? Do we have to be crushed? Do we have to have bereavement and sorrow and everything else in order to see the truth? That's what we were talking about last time. Do we need that? Do we have to go through the whole thing and then fall? I was thinking to myself, I read something that Putin had a heart attack or something like that, and I thought, oh my God, you're going to start in the hell realms, and then you're going to have to work your way all the way up again, whatever happens, because that's Rudra, okay, really Rudra. So why in the beginning would the Buddha have taught only about teaching in the world as we live it, suffering, the Four Noble Truths? Life is suffering as we live it. The cause is your karma and your negative emotions. There's a place where suffering doesn't exist if you can take the human mind and human ego out of it. And here's the path. I'm giving you the path. That's what he had to teach. He couldn't teach what he himself learned under the Bodhi tree because we weren't ready to see it. We couldn't see the purity of the teaching. So eventually the suffering catches up and we're forced to look deeply when the deception no longer serves us. And why? But the destruction in the meantime to so many beings. Why would humans do this to learn? Why suffering before enlightenment? Now that's the question, okay, tonight. Because I'm going now to James Lowe. First of all, maybe somebody wants to say something or ask something on that, because it's really important that we look at this, and that when we look around the world now, and the world is really going into an age of degeneration, truly seriously. And if we look at it, why? Why every time do we have to go right down to the bottom of the pit and then we come up again? It's just incredible. Okay. So James Lowe did this article. He did a talk on emptiness, equanimity, and kindness. And he said, if you don't understand emptiness when you are studying the Buddha Dharma, if you don't understand it, then although you might have a good heart and you might have kindness and you might be responsible for others, you won't go deep and have a basis for transforming your own appreciation on the world. All your actions will be based on duality. So interesting, because Esther, I was telling you that the prayers, when people pray, is about duality. And our whole lives are about duality and ignorance. What does that mean? It means I'm so kind and I'm giving this to you. You're over there and I'm over here. Thank goodness I'm not in the war. I'm out of the war. But we're all in it together. There's no duality. It's all an illusion. And whatever we do becomes easily dispersed. So we have to really understand it. And the Buddha, when he was asked how could he teach for so many years, he said he didn't know there was an I. He was just doing spontaneous activity. I said that to you last time. So if you look at 3 marks, this is what I started doing last time, 3 marks of conditioned existence. And these you have to know. You must put them in your diary and look at them every day, because it's really important to know the 3 marks of conditioned existence. Suffering, I don't have to explain that to you, sure. Dukkha, it's called dukkha in Sanskrit. Suffering is 1 mark. Impermanence, one of the most important things in the whole of Buddhism, that's why it's one of the mind changes, is knowing impermanence, which we'll talk about in a minute, okay? And the third one, the third mark of conditioned existence, is called the absence of an inherent self-nature. The absence of an inherent self-nature. In impermanence is called anicca, and in Sanskrit, and the absence of an inherent self-nature is called anatta. So the meaning of suffering is very, very clear to us. Impermanence is vital for us to know. Not just, of course, I know everything's impermanent, but now I'm on a holiday. And I want the holiday to extend. I don't want it to end. Now I'm in a beautiful relationship with you. Please don't die on me. Now my children are here. They're all around me and they're too wonderful. Well, I've got news for you. I've got none of them left here. They've all gone. Impermanence. Everything in our lives is impermanent, and we attach because we believe it to be permanent and we believe it to be solid. And so we attach to it, and then we suffer. We suffer so much, okay? And the absence of an inherent self-nature is really, really difficult to understand. That's the reason the Buddha taught the Skandhas. But tonight, the Skandhas, I can rattle off and you can say, yeah, I know them. That's not what I want. We're going to do a meditation on them afterwards, because if you understand why the Buddha taught the Skandhas so much, then you begin to apply it to your life. This is what we don't do with all the Dharma. We don't apply it to ourselves. We read it, it's wonderful, we sprout it to people, but we don't incorporate it into our own lives. Now, those 5 skandhas are really, really, really important, and we've got to practically, not theoretically, look at them. So this is what James Lowe says in his article. He says, I am James. I exist. I can tell you my history. I have a sense I've always been James. It's normal and natural to me to be James. I'm Melanie. It's normal and naturally for me to be Melanie. But when I look through all the things that I've done, I wonder who Melanie is, who she is. We think when people ask us who you are, you tell them, I'm Melanie, I'm Viam, I'm Diana, I'm Marion, I'm Martin, I'm Gail, I'm Molly, whatever. We tell them that's who we are. And we believe that. How do we get out of that? By breaking up the self. That's what the Buddha did. He broke it up to 5 skandhas or aggregates. Now, please, I'm going to throw this open. Okay. First, form. Okay, first your form. That's the first thing that makes up a self. Now, let's look at them. So James says, I'm composed of a form, a shape, a color of my skin. It dawns on me as I'm counseling people. I never look at people's skin color. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. I counsel Indians, black people, white people, green people, yellow people, whatever, doesn't make any difference to me. But when I hear the pain and suffering over the color of your skin, now just think about your form. Think about how attached we are to the form. Think about advertising, how advertising says, be skinny. From the time, it was during my time, some of you probably weren't even born when Twiggy came on the scene. Before that, you could be a little bit voluptuous, you could be a little bit, you could be round, you didn't have to be skinny. But Twiggy came on, and then all the girls were skinny, with anorexia and all kinds of things. Form. Go and look in the gym and see how many people there are there worrying about their form. Now go and look at the Buddha lectures or the synagogues or the churches, and they're not nearly as full as the gyms. Okay, I'm just exaggerating everything, but just form. What is that form? I think that doing counseling on Zoom is really quite a torturous process, okay? Because at least here, when I'm seeing you, I can't see myself close up because I've got it on that view. But when I'm one-on-one with people, I can see myself in full. I can see every line on my face. I can see how my hair looks. I can see everything. And it's not funny as you get older, okay? Because I think to myself, it's quite cruel, you know, when you're actually looking at yourself, counseling somebody all day long, and you see everything on you. What is form? And how do people see you through your form? I don't know if anybody wants to make any point or say anything, but it's important, this. So form is the first skandha. And why are we so focused on form? Why is it that if a plump girl walks past, no guys turn around? But if a skinny, lovely girl walks past, then people turn around and look. Where did we get this from? Form is impermanent. Yet we think that we can keep our youth. You know, film stars, you suddenly see them in their later life and their face looks like this and everything. And I wonder why you couldn't grow older gracefully. But form is the first skandha. Second skandha. Anyone want to say anything about form? Well, I'll go through them and then you can do your thing and we're going to do a meditation on it. Feelings. The second skandha is feelings. Our whole lives are based on feelings. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job. Okay. What do we have with feelings and sensations? We have positive feelings, we have negative feelings, and we have neutral feelings. You know, neutral feelings are when somebody doesn't have any opinion about anything and you can spit them out because they're neutral, okay? And people come up, you know, when there's a fight or something, I'm neutral here, I'm not taking any stand, okay?
No, can I, sorry, just jump in? Neutral
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean indifferent, does it?
You know, it's interesting. It's interesting what you ask. Does it mean indifferent? And is indifferent a good thing? Because what's the difference between indifference and non-attachment?
I think indifference, my interpretation of it,
okay, good,
implies a certain judgment. It's a certain, you know, there's a kind of a detachedness and a judgment about it, whereas being neutral implies, okay, so you think that and you think that. So I do see them as different. So that's why I'm just asking.
Okay, it's interesting. And that's the whole point. Every one of us sees every emotion differently. I don't know whoever's got their hand on, I don't know who it is because I can't see your picture. So, but please speak.
It's me.
Oh, it's you.
Yeah, I'm working from my work laptop, so I'm multitask.
I didn't know who it was. Please, Eugene. So nice that you
For me, when I listen to that, like I take it back to the Prashna Paramitra. So it's not necessarily having a prejudice or anything, but there is nothing. That nothingness that you always talk about, it's cells, it's atoms. Under the atoms, it's electrons and ions and all that kind of stuff. And if you go into everything, physicists have tried for centuries to find something, and there purely isn't anything. There's only vibrations and formations of all of those kind of stuff that then creates everything from it. So I think when like they're trying to teach us here is like, don't attach to anything. You are so much more than you know. You are Buddha nature. You are universal primordial wisdom. And that's what you should go to. So the feelings is the vibration that comes from, like you say, you get the vibe from somebody. The form is the stuff that you see. And it's our only sense of comfort because it's the only real temporary thing we can cling to. But at the same time, we cling to that that is the relative view, and that's what we can feel, that's what we can sense and touch and all that kind of stuff. But I think there is a sense in comfort in knowing that you have Buddha nature within you. But we don't always see it that way. We actually fight against it. So we actually fight against our God nature or our Buddha nature.
But we do it because the feelings are overwhelming. What you're saying is so true about feelings, but go to a bereaved person now and tell them, listen, your feelings are not substantial. They're impermanent. The person you lost was impermanent. The relationship was impermanent. You can't feel it. They'll just kick you out of their house. You know, that's all. They won't want to hear you.
Because they're not ready.
That's the point. So how practically, when we're going through a devastating experience, how practically can we actually understand these feelings that we're going through that are sometimes long, sometimes momentary? That's the question I want you to ask yourself. Don't answer it now. Let's just go through all of them, because it's what you're saying is absolutely right. And lots of us as Buddhists know it. I am not my feelings. Sometimes when I've got somebody absolutely weeping their hearts out, okay, I can't say to them, listen, your feelings they're impermanent, they're this. I just wait my time. And then I ask them eventually, is this feeling you? Is it you? Is that who you are? Because so many of these feelings then become the third skandha, which is perception. So from the way you feel, that's how your perceptions actually start, which is unbelievable. Because if you look at the feelings, should you have medication to change your feelings? When people say, well, it's physiological. The doctor told me that I've got depression and that, you know, my brain waves are not operating correctly and I've got an endogenous depression, whatever. No, you have to look at it, because basically, isn't that what's happened in the age of degeneration, that a lot of people are depressed? Maybe they're really depressed because they can't find that awakened nature. And they don't know. They think that what they see and what they feel is everything that they are. And that's such a
because
mistake.
they're stuck in the vibration. They're stuck in that negative
Exactly.
vibration.
But how do you get them unstuck? And because from the feeling...
Sound bars.
Sorry?
Sound bars.
Sound bars. Okay. You mean
So it's using the binaural beats, like using like that vibrations, it helps a lot.
Do that for me, because I can tell you something that people won't take to that very kindly when they are low. But I think that sometimes if you can wait your time to explain it, and that's why the Buddha took the 5 skandhas, and we've got to practically apply them, because the next one is perception. Now, if you analyze perception as the Buddha gave it, from my belief in how I perceive things, and then formulate them, and then those are my perceptions. Now, your perceptions come from what your parents taught you, from how you see things, from your traumatic experiences in your life, from ugly people, from horrible bosses, from all this kind of thing. You've got all these feelings, and then these feelings become your perception of everything. Now, when we go onto the 3 doors of liberation, once you understand the skandhas, once we go on to understanding emptiness and all of those things, desirelessness, aimlessness, and signlessness, when we go to the 3 doors of liberation, you start to see, oh my goodness, these perceptions are only coming from my feelings, from how I feel about the world, from all my conditioning, from my parents, from my school years, from my families, from my friends, from adverts, from people, from the news. Change your perception depending on how you feel. Sometimes you reject it. But if we look at that as perception, it is so biased. And only when we understand emptiness can we see the possibilities. You know, when you meet with somebody and you really dislike them and they do something to you, okay? And then another time you met them in a crowd and you really didn't like them. And then another time you met that person alone and you really talked to them. You really found they were actually a lovely person. And then you go, I can't believe how I felt, how I perceived that person. It wasn't all true, because they may have had a walk that was a walk like your father who abused you. They may have had a sentence that reminded you of your ugly boss. They may have touched something in a way that revolts you. They may have eaten like a pig and you didn't like it. And that's how you judge them. Those are your perceptions. And the perceptions, when the perceptions start going on and on and on and on to the next lifetime, and on and on and on and on, and on and on and on and on, those perceptions then become the fourth skandha, habit momentums. First it's a habit, and then it's a habit momentum, like when snow gathers on a big snowball coming down the mountain. It is a momentum. What are momentums? What are habit momentum? Some people are in the habit, some people, we call them control freaks. That's a control habit momentum. Some people hurt others before they can hurt them. Some people don't let people close to them. That becomes a habit momentum. Some people keep telling deluded stories to get popular. That's a habit momentum. Some people are unreliable. Some people procrastinate and procrastinate and procrastinate. And you know, I do that feeding your demons with them. And I go like, let's talk to the procrastinators. So the procrastinator's in one chair and the person's in the other chair. And so you have to, in feeding your demons, you have to really ask them, okay, so what do you want from me, procrastinator? And then they go and sit in the chair with the procrastinator, and I'm standing there next to them, playing the role of the procrastinator says, why do it? You're going to fail anyway. What's the use of doing it? You know, that's why I make you put it off, so that you won't fail anymore. I can't take failure. And slowly they have to negotiate between them so the procrastinator can stop operating, because the procrastination becomes a habit. You just put things off when you're scared, okay? Or playing victim. There are so many people that play the role of victim. It becomes a habit momentum from their perceptions. They feel people don't like them, people don't want them. So they get into the habit of playing the victim, and they're always telling you a sob story and how hard they're done by and how hard life is for them and everything. And you have to not play the game with that habit momentum. Or people pleasing. You know how many people are people pleasers? That's their habit momentum. It comes from a base of the feeling and the perception that nobody will like me. So I just give in to everybody that there is. Or obsessive compulsive. I need everything to be a particular way, because when it's in its order, I feel safe. Okay. And that, I mean, it can be extreme, but it can also be moderate, where, you know, you just go vuss on anybody that doesn't actually go along with your particular habitual momentum. And from the habitual momentum comes the consciousness. The consciousness is the fifth skandha. Now that I can give you a whole talk on, and I want us to do a meditation. So I'm not going to give you a whole talk on that because I promised I'm not going to go on and on and on at night. But if you look at the consciousness, that is the human consciousness, is how we operate in samsara. It's not the truth. The Buddha said it was a lie. It's not anything solid, but it's how we used to operating. And in order for the consciousness to transform into primordial consciousness, because the consciousness is part of the primordial consciousness, but in order for the consciousness to turn into primordial consciousness, you have to have great awareness of what you're doing. So in brief, what is the consciousness? 8 levels, 5 sense consciousnesses: eyes, ears, taste, smell, and touch. 5. Did you know that the 5 sense consciousnesses have no judgments? It's only when it comes to the 6th level of consciousness, the mind consciousness, that it judges the senses. So in other words, if you see a tree, if your eyes, your eye sense consciousness sees a tree, it has no opinion about the tree. It just sees a tree. Okay, that's all it sees. But the mind consciousness starts to say, now that's a tree, or maybe the sense consciousness just sees something green, and the mind consciousness says, that's a tree. And the 7th consciousness, which is called the klesha consciousness, is the negative emotion, says, I like that tree, I don't like that tree. I want that woman, I want you to get rid of that woman. I want this business, I don't want this. That's what the 7th consciousness says, okay? So the mind and the klesha consciousness are what we are training in meditation to not have absolute, form. And the final consciousness is called your alaya consciousness. So now think about it. You've got this form, you've got opinions about this form, and then you've got feelings. From all the feelings you attach to comes your perceptions, how you see everything in the world. From how you see everything in the world comes your habit formation, coming like that. From your habit formation, it becomes all your human consciousness. So we've got to be aware, because whatever you do, however you think, however you feel, however you act, makes an imprint in the alaya consciousness. And that stays with you even when the rest of your consciousness goes. So if you've got a habit of controlling everything and controlling others in the world, you're in a bit of trouble, because that goes with you into the next lifetime. And then you'll probably be born into a life where your parents don't look after you, where you're thrown out into the limitless blue, and where you get all this paranoia and everything, and then you want to control things even more. So the habit comes with you, and the consciousness comes with you in the alaya consciousness, and you're back. You'll be born into the circumstances that you've created yourself in the skandhas. Now, as soon as you're able to transform, and we're going to do that, not tonight, into the primordial consciousness, it's so interesting, because if you take anger, the feeling, but when you see it correctly, when you perceive it correctly, anger, the angry person, is just mirror-like wisdom. And when you understand mirror-like wisdom, it's associated with your consciousness. And so when you become mirror-like wisdom, your consciousness transforms automatically into primordial consciousness. with each of the wisdoms. So fascinating. That's why you need these wisdom at your fingertips all the time. You need to say them every day, read them every day, understand them every day. So when you come to, when this guy wrote this lovely story, and he said he came to all the workmen who were working on this big cathedral, and he said to the first workman, "What are you doing?" The first workman replied very wearily, his perception, "My job is to square off stones and move them." Then he went to the next one and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm a stone cutter, working so that I can care for my wife and children and feed my family." And then he came to the perception of the third man. "And what are you doing?" And the man looked up with great joy and said, "I am building a great cathedral." Okay, different perception, different perception, different perceptions of sad circumstances, different perceptions of this ugly war, different perceptions of everything. So how do we change that? Only with awareness. Don't take the skandhas, the stories we tell ourselves, as the basis of our existence. James Lowe says it's the myth of individual existence. There is nothing secure in it. He says, "I was feeling angry this morning. Now it's gone. My body feels this now. It's different to yesterday. We have no idea of what tomorrow's going to be like. Ever-shifting world of experience, nothing stable. Everything in us and around us is dependent origination." That's what the Buddha taught. I'm here because my parents had me. My parents had me because their parents had me. I'm angry today because this happened to me in the morning, because that happened in my house, because this happened, because that happened. It's all dependent. Nothing permanent. Everything stagnant. Nothing stable. And when we calm the mind, which we're going to do now, then we find everything is just passing through. The job I lost, that was the job I've waited for my whole life, and I didn't get it. How can that be? How can it be that I didn't get it? Okay. He says, I arise in relation to particular events. How I respond depends on different factors. None of them are stable. We have to calm the mind, and then we find there's no evidence of self-essence. And yet here I am. This is who I am. Look at me, recognize me, validate me. Suffering will be inevitable, but when we change to our true nature, what happens is very strange. Because now the people in our lives that were playing the game with us are quite angry with us, a lot of them. Some may like it, and you may have but they get quite angry. They want you to stay like you were before, even though they fought with you and everything else. Very complex.
Yeah. But they do say, Mel, that when you start to shift your consciousness, you break spiritual contracts with people that have kept you into that certain vibration, in that certain level of that's why habit momentum is so hard to change. It's one, you need to deal with your self-saboteur because you're at that vibrational level. You need to change your habits, you need to change your thought patterns, and then when you do, you have to break your spiritual contracts and your agreements and just the habits that you have with everybody that's around you. And not everybody's going to journey with you. Most of them won't make the leap with you. So you actually have to, that's why they say the spiritual path is a narrow one. So because you have to actually turn your back on a lot of people before you can make a new sangha or people around you.
Listen, I agree with you, everything you're saying, but how about the fact that there are certain very, very difficult people in our lives, okay, and people that have done awful things to us in our lives and everything. And it's really fine to move on and create a new family life and everything. But what we have to be careful of is we have to ensure that the karmic lesson is learned with those people. Otherwise, you break away from them and you get another person like that in your life almost immediately. Then you know that's the repetitive pattern. That's the imprint in your liar consciousness. So it's really
Yeah, so I'm not disagreeing with that, but what I'm saying is like it takes a very concerted effort and you have to go into a period of loneliness. And sometimes you can't cut that tie with that parent or that family member, even if you want to, because you have to pay the karma continuously. But
and
like
not
you
only
have to
pay the
be
karma.
aware.
Don't even say pay the karma. You have to learn the lesson.
Yeah,
But
but even if you've learned the lesson, so like I had a douche of a dad, but like even though I've learned the lesson, I've made my peace with it, I've had my conversations with him, I've told my family about it, da 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 da. Every time that his conscience like plagued him and he wanted to rebuild the relationship, like you had to open and and go in there with humility, and every time it was rejection. So speaking from personal experience. So but the thing is, like you have to take that lesson like you said, and you have to see it for what it is and then just move on from that. But like it
you
also
have to,
builds.
but sometimes you see, this is what is so interesting. What you're saying is 100% correct. I'm not disagreeing, but sometimes you have to take that person and actually change your whole perception of them, whereby they don't get to you anymore. What they say goes right over your head. That is one of the things, and most people can't do that because the grief and the attachment to the permanence of the feeling never allows them to do that. It's a very interesting thing. It really is. So I know what you're saying, and you do have to leave behind people, but you also, there's certain people you can't leave behind. I've got a whole host of children, husbands, wives, grandchildren and everything. You can't agree with everybody and you can't be very happy in the company of everybody, but you can learn a certain compassion and a certain allowing it to go right over your head. Even insults from people, when I'm teaching, some people really can give me terrible insults. And, Patrul Rinpoche says, look at it in the mirror and be grateful that it's there. So let's do a meditation, 5 minutes, and then I'm going to let you all go, because what we'll do is we'll go. I want you to really, really do some pondering on these skandhas, okay? Because we know the skandhas, it's a very basic teaching, but we don't know how ours are. So let's look at ours. So breathe in and breathe out. Come to this moment in time. The past is gone. The future hasn't been made, and there is no way that we can know the future. Even if we've got clairvoyance, we might have an idea, things may change, but we don't know what the future is. And so just let it all be. And right now, go into your 5 skandhas. So let's start with form. How do you feel about your body? How do you feel about your skin color, your heritage, your weight, your aging process, your exercise process? Everything you feel about your body. Imagine you having a Zoom session and you can see your body in full view. And you're looking at yourself. How come I didn't get a beautiful face? Because everything in the form is how you used it in previous lifetimes. So check in with the way you feel about your form, your hang-ups, and all of that. Form will disappear. It's temporary, transient. But there is a body of light contained right here, which never ages, which never has any of the things that we have, ailments or anything. And that's what we're going towards. Now your feelings. We could take a whole night to look at your feelings. But I want you tonight to look at the one that trips you up the most. Is it impatience? Is it impatience? Is it depression? Is it a lack of worth? Is it easily hurt? Is it fear, anger? You may have a few, but I want you to look at these feelings very deeply. See if they're solid. See if they're you. Do they have a shape? Do they have a color? What's the trigger that brings them on each time? Is it something someone says? Is it the self-worth tripping you up and giving you the feelings? Is it fear? See that you can have these feelings, but you don't have to be attached to them. They are temporary, they are transient, they are definitely not solid, even though you feel them sometimes as a solid block over your head. Your perceptions. Have a look at people close to you. How do you perceive them? Do you put them down? Do you see them freshly in their own state? Have your perceptions proven wrong sometimes? Have you found they're not really true? Have you found sometimes your perceptions are based on what you learned at school or with your parents or in your family life? Are you quick to judge people? Do you believe what you perceive to be true, absolutely true? Or could you be mistaken? Could you step back and see the world openly, which we're going to do when we study that emptiness, shunyata? And your habits. What are your habits? Controlling, hurting, making up deluded stories, unreliability, playing the victim, not letting people know anything about you, closed. Do you fold your arms a lot? Folding your arms is closing them off to the world. Are you obsessive? Do you try and please people all the time? What are your habits? Are you forgetful? Are you unaware, mindless? And finally, your consciousness. Do you judge a lot? Sometimes when you see somebody, or you see an object, or you see a situation, are you quick to put a label on? Are you quick to jump in? Or can you stand back and allow something a lot deeper and a lot broader and a lot more open in you? Are you closed? Are you in a charade? Do you play games with people? These are all the skandhas in action, compiled up with yourself, which doesn't really exist. The Buddha went out of his way to teach that it doesn't exist. Now calm the mind. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let it all be just as it is. Everything is an illusion. Zongsa Khyentse said, you have a dream that someone is poisoning you, and then you wake up from the dream and you say, thank goodness it's a dream, but all day you worry about that poisoning you got. Can you let everything be open? This is a dream, a temporary illusion. We are playing a game with ourselves. It doesn't really exist. When you die, it all dissolves, except the imprints you make. So don't attach too much importance. Figure how the Buddha would look at you and use that beautiful open perception with a question mark. One or two things and then we're going to end. You can all go to bed. Not the ones in America. You got your whole day still. Rather you than me. Anyone want to say anything? Quick march. You know, it's a wonderful teaching, the Skandhas, because it's everything that we are. And, you know, I mean, one can teach it over a long period of time. I don't really want to, but you're welcome to ask me anything that comes to you. I just give little audio messages back, whatever you want to know. Because I think, Diana, things like non-attachment, detachment, indifference, you know, what are all of these? I mean, how do we get, it's all I can tell you is one thing, that when I was younger, I was very judgmental. Very judgmental. And I'm so grateful that life's, let's say, judgment of me has made me so much less judgmental. Even when I see people passionately even destroy themselves, I don't have any feeling to crush them or anything like maybe I did in the past. I just want to look at them and try and understand where they're coming from and try and slowly go round and get them to try and see, you know, what it is that they're hanging on to. So next time we'll start on the 3 doors to liberation, which are very, very interesting when you really look at them. Just the things we do without thinking. And I'm very happy to stay if anybody wants to ask anything or you think about it. But I'd really like you to take this home, and I'd really like you to ponder it. Take the 5 skandhas, write them down, and just become aware of them in your daily life and how it affects you and how you can change by knowing that the Buddha said none of the skandhas exist per se. They're just what we've created in solidity. The minute we understand emptiness, there's nothing solid there. Just knowing that a terrible experience isn't solid is very important to me, really. And I just want to say one last thing, and then I really am going to end, that Taisitu Rinpoche, somebody in Israel wrote me and sent me stuff today. Then I wrote back and I said, it seems there isn't a solution to the problem. However, Taisitu Rinpoche said, and I had it written down, that the solution was there before the problem ever existed. We just can't see it. It's interesting, isn't it? The solution was there before the problem ever became a problem. So if we change our perception, we might be able to get a different perspective. So everybody, let's dedicate, and then I'll stay if anybody wants to ask anything. Let's dedicate to all sentient beings, especially those caught in the wars, caught in the hatred, caught in bereavement, families that have lost so many members, and in Ukraine, and in the earthquakes, and in the floods, and in everything. We dedicate this whole teaching to them to be able to know that nothing is permanent, everything is impermanent, and that there can be another perspective to everything. And through this merit, may we achieve all-seeing Buddhahood, and thereafter, once all harmful enemies have been defeated, the inner enemies, may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, all our illusions. Sonam diye tamche zipane topne nepe dranam pamshene jegana chibala dropaye sipe sole doa dro warsho.